everybody. Here we are on April 2nd. This is a time-lapse video I put together to try and show some of the work we've been doing on the car, and starting out here as we got going on the Saturday. We're getting the splash shield, which I just finished painting and rocker guarding, just putting the foam trim on it that will help keep some pressure and alignment on the fiberglass fender. So we just getting that mocked up and put into place. Pretty simple install with essentially I think it's four bolts or four screws and a single bolt, body bolt, and then you have the adjustability in and out to set the fender. Pretty important for getting the fender gap lined up to the door, and we're working with fiberglass fenders, so they're a little more floppy than the steel fender, and as you can see there, basically just plop it on the car, and now going through the steps to align it. But as we were doing this, saw a couple of the spots where we run the body bolts through weren't quite lined up, so we end up as we're doing this, we end up taking the fender back off the car and realigning or fixing where some of those body U-nuts are to accept the body bolts. It's probably one of the slower processes of doing all this work is the getting all that alignment to all the fender gaps and the door gaps and the fender straight and everything lined up. For the way the car was put together originally as a race car, the fenders were just nut and bolted on in maybe two or three spots. There wasn't a lot of care taken to ensure that the car would hold together going down the road. It really just had to look good on the drag strip and make quarter-mile passes without shaking itself apart. So now that we're going to put it on the street, just want to make sure that everything can be securely bolted and nothing's going to move around. And we're with some of the door gaps and stuff that we're running or that I've laid out on this car, they're a little tighter than the stock door gaps. So the clearances, everything's pretty important just to make sure that the door can sort of slip inside the fender as it opens, and yeah, so just a fair bit of futzing to do to get everything just right. All right, so after doing some futzing with the fender, as we set it back on, this time around, getting all the bolts in it, body bolts into it, loose to start. And then we're going to basically work on setting the gap between the fender and the top of the cowl, and the door, and then as well set the gap of the fender for where the door tucks into the fender. So um, here I'm just taking a peek to make sure we've got everything lined up and start getting all the body bolts in. And basically for setting the gaps, the tricks that I saw that other guys were using on YouTube videos that I was watching is just using a like a paint stir stick, and the width of that, like the thickness of it, for the gap, and it creates a really nice, probably a little bit over 1/8 inch gap, and gives you a nice clean line, and was able to get pretty much everything lined up that way. And then of course checking the body line and making sure that it's as level as it can be. There's, of course, was likely to be some work to be done with some filler to um, massage some of that a little bit, but if we can get it lined up as close as possible without filler, of course that is ideal. And then as the body gaps were coming together, basically, going around and tightening the fender into place. And again, I'm not a body guy. I am just a DIY guy that likes to do things for himself and figure things out. And there will be some pride come the end of this project that, if I was able to do 90% of it myself, I'd be pretty proud of that. Especially having little to no experience in doing this type of work specifically. So um, YouTube has been just a great platform to learn, a lot of different techniques and watch guys work on their projects. And enjoy channels like, I think I said before, but Eastwood and Bad Chad Customs. There've been some good inspirational material. And then Kevin Tetz, with his series of videos. Some good mentors out there, for guys who aspire to do things themselves. So I'm just putting the top bolt into the between the fender and the cowl to set the gap there, and that'll also kind of give us that top line alignment on the body, from the fender to the door. So right here I'm about to check the alignment of the splash shield and how it affects the fender. And you can see I'm just using some plastic paint sticks to kind of pry the fiberglass fender out a little bit to be able to move that inner splash shield and then tighten it up so that it kind of creates the right shape on the fender and holds it where it needs to be. And then once we had that done, you'll see me kind of lay down on the ground and basically we're putting the final bolt in the bottom of the fender to get everything held in place. So I was struggling a little bit with the alignment of the fender and ended up, you'll see, in order to get it to sit out properly so that the passenger door can kind of tuck in as it opens, I had to space out the bottom of the fender a little bit, just using some body washers to get again, just kind of working to get the alignment just right. I think there I am backing off the splash shield so that I could try to realign everything. It's a bit of, as I learned, it's a very sort of tedious process, and it's tighten it, loosen it, and you just keep working at it until you get it right. There's definitely lots of little movements here and there, and then I ended up having to grab an additional piece of foam tape to put in there. Just needed a little bit more pressure on that fender to create the shape. It was a little bit on the flat side, so I wanted it to be following the curve of the door. Same idea. So you can see there that now it's a big improvement that as you push the fender back in, you don't see the edge of the door the way you did just a few moments ago. And I don't know if every every fiberglass type fender job goes this way, but there's certainly a little bit more work to do with them than what you would encounter, I think, with a steel fender. But but it does all come together, and then once I've got the door gaps good, then we'll move on here to ultimately getting some body filler in there and really setting the door gap. But the next step after we get this fender on is we're going to put the rad support on just to make sure that everything is lined up the way it should be, that things are tightened and the fenders are being pulled and pushed and you know really ending up in the right spot for where they belong. And I think ultimately I had to do just a minor tweak on the door, just moving the door clasp to get the alignment just so as far as how it lined up to the back fender. Um, but overall came together really well. As you can see there, I'm checking the gap again with the plastic stir stick, so just making sure it's what I want. So um, this car is not a full frame off restoration, or because it's a unibody, but I didn't have a rotisserie to work with, so basically tackling things as I can access them, and pieces that came off the car like this rad support. I'm going through cleaning the metal if the metal needs repair, or doing that. I really like the KBS coating products for covering metals and giving them rust protection if needed. So that's what we'll do with this afterwards. But for the sake of trying to continue forward on the body work, I'm just getting this fender support cleaned off for now, and then we'll bolt it in place and continue on with going down the passenger side of the car and getting the body work completed. All right, now that the rad support's all cleaned off, just bolting it in place. Basically use some nutsert style fasteners into the fiberglass, and then just allows me to thread that crossbar straight in. And once it's good and tight, then it's on to working on the passenger side of the car. So everything basically is all tightened up, aligned, ready to go. So now we start the process of working on the passenger side. So the car's got basically a light coat of primer on it currently, and so we're just spraying some guide coat in order to identify low spots in the primer or in the body itself. I had taken the car right down to essentially the bare sheet metal and taken the fiberglass more or less down to its base layers. And now we're going to start to smooth everything out and see where we need to use some filler and build up some of the low spots. So, here's of course, the tedious part of the job, which is all the hand sanding. But again, the Durablock set that I have, boy, I sure like that. It's with the different shapes and contour type pieces that you can use to do the sanding. It makes it quite nice, as opposed to just using a normal smaller sanding block or something of that nature. And the car has so many sort of curves to it that it's tough to use like a 5-inch or a 6-inch orbital sander. It works in some spots for sure: the hood, the roof, the trunk. You can get away with it, the big flatter areas on the doors, but a lot of the car really needs hand sanding and attention that way. So as we work, around the car, I'm just using 80 grit sandpaper. Basically use the 40 or 60 grit paper to knock down body filler, 80 grit to more or less flush out the surface. And then once we lay a good several coats of primer on the car, I'll be block sanding it again with a 240 grit, and then making sure we've got no low spots. And then just prior to paint, we'll be stepping it up to a 400 grit paper to do the finish sanding on the car. So yeah, so here we are, just working back and forth, and getting the body, to what is as level a state as possible. And then you'll see that we start to, once we get down the fender side and the door a little ways, then I work on applying some body filler, and with the focus first being on setting the door gaps, the low spots on the fender, and then I'll continue from there. All right, you probably noticed that, as I'm sanding the car, going back and forth in an X pattern, um, something that, I picked up from some other mentors on YouTube, but just making sure that, as you create the scratch going one direction, you're essentially kind of canceling it out going the opposite, and it gives you, really nice flat flush type sand. And always too, you'll see me quite often blowing the paper off with the airline, just trying to keep the paper from really getting gummed up, and keep it clean. Makes the paper last way longer. And yeah, just kind of working it through. And as I'm sanding, I'm just watching that guide coat, and looking to see essentially, as it disappears, I can move on to the next spot to keep flattening it out. And you don't want to go too far down, of course, because you don't want to break through the gel coat or on the fiberglass or do anything like that. So again, I'm just working it to get the surface flat. If there's a low spot, I'm taking my Makita marker pen and circling the spot, so I know I've got to come back and lay a little bit of filler in there just to level the surface. Um, None of the filler on the car is there for the benefit of, filling holes or doing anything like that. It's all just for the purpose of smoothing the body and getting it nice and flat and even. So All right, so as it gets ready to start sanding the door and basically trying to make sure that it's flush to the back fender now, just doing a small adjustment on the door catch just to make sure that the door lines up properly, kind of in out type way. And then what we'll do is I'm sanding back and forth over the door gap to see where I've got low spots. So basically what I'll do is as I set the door gap, I'll bring the two surfaces to level with each other, filling in any low spots and again creating a nice transition from the door to the fender. And we'll do that process on both the front and the back seam. Again, making that process nice and even. And here we can get away with using the orbital sander because we've got the big flat surface. We can hold the sander nice and flat, and we can get an even sand over both spots. So here, just doing a little bit more tweaking to the door, putting a bit more of the guide code on so that we can see exactly, where we are at with how level the two surfaces are, and do a little bit more of a sanding against it with the block sander, and just be able to identify again, where exactly we need to put the filler to level the two surfaces against each other. All right, so we have some body filler mixed up. Just using a brand called Evercoat, lightweight body filler. And so we're going to start basically laying the body filler down across the gap. Um, and we'll come back and use kind of a trick I saw on YouTube, that just as the body filler is setting up, it gets just hard enough that you can trim out your door gap with a razor blade, and then pull out the semi-hardened piece, and have a really nice sharp line to it. So basically, as I'm working the body filler in, I'm kind of filling up that gap, and working it all the way across till it's nice and sort of, buttery smooth, and getting it laid on there. And we'll do the same thing as we come up to the front of the fender, working it up into the seam, working it across those areas that we saw that were low as a result of the sorry, mind slip, but the paint that we put on to find the low spots. So it's we really only have to fill that section and a little bit outside just to feather it out. But then we'll go across the fender too, and all the spots that we mark that were low, giving those a touch up and a fill. And then we'll come back and we'll use that same paint method, and look, resand over the Bondo and look for the low spots, if any left. But hopefully we put on enough product that after we do our next sanding step, we don't have a low spot. We've actually leveled it out. And the guide coat, that's the word that slipped my mind, but the guide coat will show us, that we either got it bang on or we have a touch more to do. So that was another thing that I picked up watching, some of the different mentors on YouTube. But it's putting enough product on the car, not because you're going to leave it there. You end up probably sanding 90% of it off and putting it on the floor, but just putting enough product on the body to be able to sand it and get to that ultra smooth body work that you're shooting for using the guide coat. So and it's true. I mean, you can see in the video how much dust is on the floor in my shop there, and that's all body filler, that basically putting it on and then taking about 90% of it back off, and but ending up with a really nice result for the way the car will be smoothed out. So, and it's tough to tell with all the splotchiness looking of the car, but once you get those next coats of primer on it and start to work that, that's when we'll really be able to see how well or how good or how poor we did with the body work. So hopefully more to the how good we did. So all right, and here you can see the body filler is basically tacked up just enough that when you touch it, it's not tacky to the touch, but it's still, you can still feel it's a little bit on the soft side. So I'm able to use the razor blade and start to work my way through the body filler, and essentially create my gap that I want between it and the door. So, or between the fender and the door, I should say. So yeah, just kind of, and you can see I'm able to kind of peel it out and pull it back. So it gets kind of easy to work with. That's kind of the fun spot at which to be able to kind of pull those out and get that gap looking good. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Leave us a like and subscribe, and hope to see you next time.